In this episode, we talk about the government failing to utilize even 1% of the funds allocated to curb the country's air pollution. We also discuss an initiative that has helped hundreds of people with disabilities in Rajasthan. But first, we talk about the arrest of a journalist in Assam. Hi, I'm Ichha Sharma, and you're listening to Three Things, the Indian Express news show. Last Tuesday, the Assam police arrested journalist Dilwar Hussain Majumdar just hours after he went to cover a protest against the Assam Cooperative Apex Bank in Guwahati. Here it is key to note that BJP MLA Shri Bishwajit Phukan is the chairperson of this bank and Assam's Chief Minister Himanta Biswa Sharma is a member of its board of directors. Now, Majumdar was released after spending 4 nights in jail, and his case has once again sparked concerns about press freedom and the growing challenges journalists face in the country today. To talk about this matter in detail, my colleague Shashank Bhargava speaks to the Indian Express's Sukrita Barua, who has been reporting on the story for the newspaper.
Sukrita, we understand that the Assam Cooperative Apex Bank, ACAB, it is a government-affiliated bank, and protests were taking place at its headquarters in Guwahati on Tuesday. And this is what Dilwar had gone to cover. Tell us, what do we know about what led to his arrest that day?
So on Tuesday, there was a protest that was held by the youth wing of the regional party, which is Ahom Jatiyo Porishad. So they were holding a protest over there over some existing allegations against the bank of financial irregularities, in tendering. Like they were saying there's a massive inflation in the tendering cost of the bank and among other things. So there was a protest that was being held that day, and Dilwar Hussain Majumdar, he is a senior journalist for this digital portal called the Cross Current, which is a digital news platform operating from Assam, based in Assam, and they do a lot of investigative work, and they've done a lot of, in quotes, exposés, about irregularities and, particularly with relation to the state government's functionings and the chief minister. So Dilwar Hussain Majumdar had gone to cover the protest, and he was there. And from what we know is that while the protest was going on, the managing director of the bank, Mr. Dombaru Saikia, he arrived and he got out of the car. So Majumdar approached him and, started asking questions. There are these allegations of irregularities. What do you have to say about it?
Yeah, and this in fact can be seen in a video that Dilwar put out shortly after he was detained.
Yeah, he shared this video where, it's from his perspective. So he's approaching Mr. Saikia and asking him these questions. And Mr. Saikia seems to have said, let's just go upstairs. Like Mr. Saikia was walking away from his car and walking into the office. That's all we see. We don't see anything else. And Dilwar shared it saying that this is the reason that I am being detained by the police.
বহুত মই ক্ৰছ কেন্দ্ৰৰ পৰা হয় বহুত দুৰ্নীতিৰ অভিযোগ আহি আছে কি ক'ব এই মুহূৰ্তত আজি প্ৰতিবাদ কৰি আছে আৰু বিশেষকৈ এই যে ৰিক্ৰুটমেণ্টৰ ক্ষেত্ৰত দুৰ্নীতিৰ কথাটো আহি আছে অভিযোগ আহি আছে আপোনালোকে দেখা পাইছে সেই বস্তুটো আপুনি যদি ৰখে তেতিয়াহ'লে মই প্ৰশ্নকেইটা কৰিব পাৰিম
Now, there are version after version about what happened, right? What played out next. But Dilwar went upstairs and he came back down. And when he came back down, the police of that area, the Panbajar police station police, asked him to get into their vehicle. And I believe from, accounts of other journalists that, other journalists said, you can't do that. So if the official wants to meet Dilwar, then they can summon him and he will go to the police station himself. He doesn't need to be taken in a police vehicle. So his editor, Urkulita, told me that Dilwar sent whatever, visuals, footage he had. And then he went off to the police station himself. And this is at around 1 p.m. So he went to the police station and he was kept there.
And while detaining him, are they giving any reasons as to why they're doing this?
So throughout Tuesday, none of us had any clarity on why he was being detained. So he was detained right from 1 p.m. to the rest of the day. So as word spread that he is being detained in the police station, his family arrived at the police station, as did a lot of journalists and some lawyers as well, who wanted to know why he was being detained. But there were no answers. Then I understand that late at night, 10:30, 11, finally, his wife was allowed to come because he needed his medication. He's a diabetic. So she was brought in, and then later she was told, again, like very late at night, that an FIR has been registered against Dilwar and that now he is arrested. And then when the grounds of arrest were furnished, and there it said that a complainant has alleged that Dilwar misbehaved with them and used, offensive language, and that the grounds for arrest included the violation of the SC/ST Atrocities Act. So apparently, what the grounds for arrest cite is that the complainant said that he used offensive language, and he said, I quote, Boro Jati Hoy. Basically means that, because you're from the Boro community, like, you're doing too much. So that is what was cited as the grounds for arrest. And so he was booked under the SC/ST Atrocity Act, which is a non-bailable offense.
And wait, at that point, do we know who the complainant was?
So at that point of time, there was still no clarity about who this complainant is. Right? So nobody knew. And then police said that next day that the complainant is a security guard at the bank. Okay, who is from the Boro community. So that is what happened on Tuesday. And at the same time, while he was arrested under this particular complaint, another complaint had been registered. This time by the managing director of the bank, Mr. Saikia, who alleged that, Dilwar had unlawfully entered into the first floor of the head office and tried to steal invaluable bank documents. And on Wednesday, he was produced before the court of the CJM and he was granted bail in the SC/ST Atrocity Act wala case. So he was granted bail, but it was really late in the evening. It was past 6 o'clock. So what was said is that it's really late and, it's not possible to process the necessary documents now. So he has to spend the night in custody. So he was taken to Guwahati Central Jail and he spent that night in jail. And, all of Thursday passed and people were waiting, that he would be released. But nothing happened, and it was 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, and we were asking when is Dilwar going to be released. And then at around 8 p.m. he's taken out of the jail, and people who were present there were told that he has been arrested in the second case now. So he was taken from the jail to the police station again, and he was rearrested.
Yeah, because he got bail in the STSC case, but then he got arrested in the case that was filed against him by Saikia.
Yeah, by the bank MD. And he spent yet another night in jail. Then on Friday, he was produced before the court again and he got bail again. But exactly like Wednesday, it was too late. It was like at around 7 p.m. So then once again, he was taken back to jail. So he spent a total of 4 nights imprisoned basically. And Saturday, finally, late in the evening, he was released.
And Sukrita, after he was arrested, talk about the reaction this prompted from journalists in the state and even the chief minister later on.
So Dilwar's arrest, saw unprecedented protests by journalists across the state. So journalists in Guwahati, journalists in other parts of Assam, came out really strongly against his arrest. And, they strongly stated that this was a breach of press freedom.
We want justice! 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 We want justice! 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 You know what lucky boy! Lucky boy! Lucky boy! I'm a mere lucky boy! Lucky boy! Lucky boy! I'm a mere lucky boy! Lucky boy! Lucky boy!
Yeah, and the other thing we should mention is that Dilwar is also the Assistant General Secretary of the Guwahati Press Club.
Correct. Along with being a senior journalist, Mazumdar is also the Assistant General Secretary of the Guwahati Press Club, which is an elected position. And the Guwahati Press Club is the most prominent press body in Assam. So there were unprecedented protests by him and by, young reporters, senior reporters. A lot of people have said that, this is like a first in quite a few decades, that they saw this kind of outpouring of outrage by the journalistic community in the state. So, when this happened, so the chief minister was addressing a press conference and he was, of course, questioned about this particular thing. So he said a couple of things which have generated a lot of discussion amongst the journalistic community, among civil society in the state, and I think outside the state as well. So one thing he said is that from the state government's perspective, Dilwar does not qualify as a journalist. because he is an employee of a digital portal, the Cross Current. And he said that the state government recognizes, in his words, I quote, legacy media. So he said print, so newspaper journalists, and electronic media, so TV journalists. These are who we recognize as journalists. These are the people that we give accreditation to and who we give advertisements to. So these, in our perspective, are journalists. Dilwar is not a journalist. And then he said a couple of other things which he claimed make Dilwar not a journalist. So he said that he has a dumper business. So he owns dumpers. So he's a businessman, and how can he be a journalist is another thing that he said. The second thing he said is that the charges that are against Dilwar are not of a journalistic nature. So he's not been arrested for something that he's written. He's been arrested because he abused somebody. He's been arrested because he tried to steal documents. So he's kind of shrugged off this whole thing. And, through these two things, he's trying to say that, Dilwar has been arrested as a private individual for offenses committed in that capacity. So this, should not be a reason for journalists to rise up against or stand up against the state government.
Okay, so the chief minister dismissed the allegations that were being leveled against the government. And also, while talking about Dilwar, he in a way discredited so many other journalists like him. And at a time when there were already protests going on, what was the kind of reaction that the chief minister's statements prompted?
So what it has generated is a conversation amongst journalists in the state for now, where they are trying to work towards, discussing the possibility of advocating and pushing for some kind of legal protection, ideally a law for the protection of journalists.
Yeah, and after he was released, Dilwar in fact spoke to the media. Tell us, what did he have to say about all this?
He was very emotional, and particularly because of the kind of support that he saw. And something that he said repeatedly is that he will continue raising questions. But of course, he didn't comment much on the case because it is sub judice, so he can't. But so he said that he will continue asking questions since that is his job as a journalist.
And under this government, and especially a lot of BJP-led governments now, we are seeing what many describe as a clampdown on journalists. But when we talk about Assam, can you talk about what has been this current government led by Himanta Biswa Sarma? Can you tell us what has been their treatment of the media?
So the chief minister has been very, very openly, said that journalists should support the government and they should write. He says that, people don't want to read negative news and they want to read positive news. So, the people should write positive stories about the government. So it has been, openly kind of critical journalism. And there have been other instances where, journalists have been lashed out at. For example, several months ago, we had an incident where a young journalist who is a Bengali origin Muslim, this was at the time when the chief minister was making a lot of negative statements about the University of Science and Technology Meghalaya, whose chancellor is also a Bengali origin Muslim, Mr. Mahbubul Haq. And the journalist had asked some questions, raising questions about, why the chief minister is accusing them of flood jihad. Right? That was a word that the chief minister was using. So when that young journalist had kind of raised another question on this particular issue, the chief minister had lashed out at him and, singled him out for his identity. So that was also a time when, several press bodies had, again, stood up in support of the journalist. But yeah, that's what I mean. Critical questioning, you can see, journalists being singled out, targeted, scolded publicly. That's something we've seen quite a lot.
And next, we talk about air pollution. The air quality in the country's urban centers has consistently remained poor, and in some cases, extremely hazardous for years now.
Delhi has overtaken the Pakistani city of Lahore as the most polluted city on earth.
The air pollution in New Delhi this week has reached 50 times the internationally recommended safe limit.
This small industrial town of Barnihart on the Assam-Meghalaya border is now the most polluted town in the world.
Air pollution caused 1 in 8 deaths in India last year, yes.
But even as Indian cities continue to grapple with high pollution levels, a recent parliamentary report has flagged that funds allocated to tackle this issue remain severely underutilized. In fact, in the current financial year, the Ministry of Environment had set aside over 850 crore rupees under the Control of Pollution scheme. However, it spent less than 1% of this amount. This finding was part of a report tabled in Parliament last week by a key oversight committee. To understand what this means and how it impacts India's broader pollution control efforts, we spoke to the Indian Express's Nikhil Ghanekar, who has been tracking this story.
So this report was basically tabled on 25th of March by the department-related Parliamentary Standing Committee on Science and Technology, Environment, Forest and Climate Change. This is one of the many department-related parliamentary standing committees which looks at specifically at the functioning of different government departments and ministries. And this specific report was pertaining to the demands for grants for the upcoming financial year. Essentially what this means is that the standing committee, which is comprised of members from both the houses of parliament, Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha, they scrutinize the spending that was done by the ministry, the relevant ministry in the previous financial year, in this case the Environment Ministry, and they also give recommendations on that basis.
Now, Nikhil says that among these recommendations, the committee raised concerns about the extremely low spending done under the Control of Pollution scheme, which is fully funded by the central government to monitor air, water and noise pollution and their quality levels across the country.
So what they found was that there was a shocking lack of expenditure on part of the Environment Ministry when it came to the Control of Pollution scheme. Now this scheme is essentially a central sector scheme, which means that it is fully funded by the central government. There are other schemes known as the central sponsored schemes in which the state also bears some share of the expenditure, but in this scheme 100% is given by the union government. And they found that even though over the previous financial years the allocated budget was spent almost 100% proportion, in the financial year 24 and 25, out of the 858.5 crores that was allocated to them in the budgetary estimate of 24-25 financial year, only 7.22 or less than 1% of the budget was spent.
So the question is, why did such a significant amount go unused? Well, the answer was so bureaucratic that Nikhil tells us that the committee was shocked to hear it.
So the committee asked them as to why this was the case, that they had not disbursed or sanctioned the use of funds. So in their reply, the ministry informed that the utilization of the majority of funds in the scheme for the current financial year, which is now ending 3 days later, could not be made because the approval for the continuation of this scheme was not received. The approval has been sought till the FY 25-26. But since this was awaited, they did not, do any disbursement. To this, the committee was quite shocked to note that considering that control of pollution is such an important issue in a country like India where we are faring very badly on controlling air pollution. So they said that the ministry should introspect. And to quote from the ministry report, they said that at a time when the ministry is required to address the grave and critical challenge of the air quality, Ministry has not been able to decide the continuation of the consent scheme, and as a result of which not even 1% of the funds allocated have been utilized, and hence the committee recommended that the ministry should introspect and take serious note of the reasons for this gross underutilization.
The committee in its report noted that this underutilization of funds directly impacts India's clean air ambitions, particularly in the so-called non-attainment cities, where pollution levels routinely exceed national standards.
The National Clean Air Program, which was launched around 17-18, this essentially was launched in light of the worsening air quality situation in different parts of the country. And at that time, it was felt when the launch happened that there should be an approach where only metro cities are not looked at. The approach was to take a view of all the cities in India, major towns in India, and not just tier 1 cities, but tier 2, tier 3 even, and also smaller towns. The point was to fund this through two different mechanisms, and the ultimate goal was to reduce the levels of particulate matter 10.
Now, for those who may not know, PM10 refers to particulate matter that is 10 micrometers or smaller, small enough to be inhaled and cause serious health issues. Now, the Clean Air program aims to reduce PM10 levels by up to 40% by 2026, using 2017 levels as the baseline. But Nikhil says that the committee's report goes even beyond the pollution control scheme and also examines the ministry's overall spending patterns.
Now, the funding aspect, as I was mentioning earlier, is twofold. The 15th Finance Commission provides funding to one aspect, which is 49 cities which have a population of more than 1 million. And there is the other funding pattern which comes from the Ministry of Environment and Forest and Climate Change directly. This is to 82 cities which are known as non-attainment cities. Non-attainment cities are nothing but places where they are not conforming to the national ambient air quality standards. So because this component of funding from the NCAP, the National Clean Air Program, comes directly from MOEF, it will affect the plans which have been made over the past few years. They will have been definitely hampered in the financial year 24-25. So that's the direct impact of the underutilization of funds.
Now, Nikhil tells us that the broader concern isn't just about bureaucratic huddles, but about the impact these bottlenecks have on public health, especially since air pollution is a known trigger for various respiratory and cardiovascular issues.
So the health cost of air pollution, as we are aware, more and more people are now aware of the severe impacts and long-term, short-term and medium-term impacts of air pollution. Thanks to a lot of saturation coverage, I would say, in a lot of media, and also in general, people are more aware over the years considering the kind of interest that has been taken by the judiciary, the media, and also the common people. Now, fundamentally, we know that air pollution affects our respiratory organs. That is the number one health impact, as we all know. It affects our lung capacity. It will cause upper respiratory and lower respiratory disorders. The more serious impacts of this in the long term are that it also causes cancer in the long term. It has been cited in scientific literature also that people who live close to, let's say, for example, mining areas, coal mines and thermal power plants, long-term exposure can lead to very serious issues such as cancer. Then there are heart issues, heart diseases of various kinds that can be suffered by people who are living in extremely polluted areas. So there is overwhelming scientific literature now which shows that human life expectancy is at risk because of, it's reducing because of the impacts of air pollution. And it is almost a right of people to get cleaner air, and that is why the governments have taken serious action over the years. However, we see that the action is not enough as of now. It is not fast enough. It is not been scaled up at a pace which requires to be done. So this parliamentary report once again signifies that we have a long way to cover as far as cleaning our dirty air is concerned.
And in the end, we talk about how a local initiative in rural Rajasthan has helped over 700 persons with disabilities. This initiative was implemented in the state's newly carved Salumber district.
Salumber is a tribal district where more than 70% of the area consists of tribal population.
That's the Indian Express's Parul Kulshrestha, who reports on the state for the paper.
So there have been a lot of challenges in this district because a lot of development has not reached to the people. They are still educationally backward. There is a lot of problem with the infrastructure. Even schools are not functioning properly. There are a lot of teacher shortage and all. So we can see that it's a typical tribal area of Rajasthan, which also comes under the TSP area, under which it has been provided special policies by the state government.
And taking advantage of such policies, a campaign was launched last year where people with disabilities were given access to assistive technology such as battery-operated wheelchairs and sensor-equipped walking sticks. This campaign was launched by the region's newly appointed district collector, Jasmeet Singh Sandhu.
So he had done some camps and all in his previous posting as well. So here, with the help of another social justice department director, Mr. Hemant Khatik, and he initiated a process of identifying the disabled people in the district who are in need of special assistance, like any form of, maybe walking stick or maybe a wheelchair, any form of assistance that these people need. They made a list of those people, conducted a big camp all across the district, door-to-door survey, and after that they distributed this kind of around more than 700 equipment to the disabled people of the district.
This, she says, was done under the Sambal Abhiyan in coordination with the Social Justice Department and Alamco, the Artificial Limbs Manufacturing Corporation of India. But this was not a routine distribution drive. It took months of preparation backed by door-to-door surveys conducted by ASHA workers and local officials, layered verification, and significant administrative cooperation.
So there were two phases under which they identified the beneficiaries. One was the door-to-door survey. They roped in all the ASHA workers and all those, the workers from the Jilla Mukhyalay and the village level. All the workers of the district were working for this scheme and for this camp. They identified the people who are in need of these kind of equipment. After that, they identified who need the equipment on priority. So anyone who has more than 40% of disability were held eligible. Maybe a person who is paraplegic or a man who is blind, or anyone needs any form of Baisakhi to walk properly. People were even in need of, battery automatic wheelchair. So those people were identified and the list was made. And after which on September 2024, there was a camp held where the equipment were distributed. Now, at the time of the camp, there were a lot of people who faked their disability. Like the officials told me that there were some people who, faked their walk, and someone was like literally dragging himself on the ground just to get the wheelchair, the automatic wheelchair, so that they can sell them in the open market. But they were able to identify them because there was a specialized team of doctors that was also sitting there who were there to identify the people whether they have a proper disability or not. So in that way, they were able to filter out the fake ones. And also there was a statewide data that the government have where the beneficiaries are registered through their Aadhaar card. So someone has taken this kind of benefit in the past, maybe any camp maybe in Alwar or maybe in Delhi and all. So they have that registered. So in that way, they were able to, filter out the people who do not need those assistance.
Now, Parul, during your research, you spoke with a few beneficiaries of this initiative. So what did they have to say about the impact this has had on the community?
So one of the biggest impact that people told me was this student who is living in this tribal area. In that area, there was no connectivity. So in that time, he has no one who can push him to the bus stand so that he'll be able to take the bus or catch the bus. So in that way, the automatic wheelchair that was provided to him, the electric wheelchair, was very helpful for him because it was a battery wheelchair and he can take it anywhere without anyone's help. And important reason is that a lot of times, a lot of disabled did not even have hands, properly functioning hands. So in that way, it helped them. There was this guy I met who was blind. At the age of 3 or 4, he went complete blind. So he was given a vibrating stick for the blind person. His name was Pratap Meena. And the best part of this stick was that it has a sensation and vibration. So whenever he's walking on the street or any village road, there will be an automatic vibration if there is any obstacle in front of him. So he was able to travel freely to his farms and, take his children to school. So it was very beneficial for them. So in this way, the rural areas, the equipment were provided as per their need and the necessity of those people.
Right, and the administrative officials who are at the center of this entire initiative, what did they share about the process?
I think one of the biggest thing that the officials told me is that the junior officials told me that until unless a district head, which is a collector, is interested in organizing such kind of camps, because it is a very tedious work. You have to go door to door, have to make a list of people. Then you have to call Alimco, which is actually a central government agency, which is a non-profit agency. And they require all form of, documents and all to be provided to them before they come and distribute these kind of equipment. So it is a very tedious and a very long process. It took them around 7-8 months to prepare for that one camp in September. So until unless the district administration is willing to do that, the collector is willing to do that, it is not possible. So I think it is a willingness on the part of collector which actually made it possible for the officials and even the central government officials to distribute this kind of equipment to the needy.
And lastly, Parul, considering how newly formed the region is, could you tell us what were the biggest challenges in implementing this program? And also, how can they be mitigated to replicate this initiative in, other regions as well?
I think it was one of the biggest reason was that people do not trust the government very easily, especially in the rural areas. Because I had met some few disabled people's family members. They told me that they had applied earlier for a wheelchair or, for a walking stick and all. But they did not receive any form of help from the government. So to convince them to reach to their nearby camp and, register themselves and have proper documentation, because a lot of them do not even have had documentation, Aadhaar card and all. So to convince them to make such effort is very difficult for the government officials. So you have to make them understand that this is a thorough process and it's going to be implemented properly, because they do not trust the system very easily. That is one problem that the government faced. Also, it's a very tedious process and it has to be done systematically. Otherwise, there are a lot of beneficiaries and, middlemen who are ready to take advantage of it. So you have to be very clever in implementing this, and a lot of workforce is required to properly implement it so that the benefit can be given to the people who actually need it.
You were listening to 3 Things by the Indian Express. Today's show was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar and produced by Shashank, Bhargava and me, Ichha Sharma. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it. Share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can also tweet us at Express Audio and write to us at podcast@indianexpress.com.